Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel. Hoài Ca and Hung's YouTube channel is a place that captures real-life moments, slow, quiet, and deeply genuine from their married life. After welcoming their baby girl Anna, Hoài Ca gradually recovered, slowly returning to her familiar daily rhythm. The whole family moved back into their small home, a place where, for the first time, they truly existed as a complete family, a mother, a father, big brother Tony, and little Anna in her mother's arms. From that moment on, days that once felt ordinary began to carry a different meaning. Waking up together each morning, sharing simple meals, watching Anna grow little by little, all of it became something worth remembering. The moments of real life in their marriage were never flashy or dramatic. They were simply ordinary days, preserved through sincerity, through a quiet kind of love that endures gently over time. The final days of 2025 passed in the calm atmosphere of that small family. There was no rush, no major upheaval, just familiar routines unfolding steadily. From early morning, the house carried a subtle sense of anticipation, hard to name, as if everyone could feel time quietly shifting. Hoài Ca sat at the table, carefully writing down the shopping list, thinking through every small item, just enough for the family's daily needs. Hung prepared for the morning with his usual tasks. He helped Tony put on his jacket, bent down to adjust the straps of his preschool backpack, his movements slow but steady. Tony stood still for a moment, then couldn't help but fidget, his curious eyes drifting toward the door. Before the family stepped outside, the house still held the warm, familiar scent of a year-end morning. Tony trotted along behind them, his short legs moving quickly, each step filled with childlike excitement. From time to time, he turned back to look at little Anna, cradled securely in her mother's arms. His gaze lingered, as if he needed to be sure she was still there, still with the family on this familiar outing. Outside, the streets were bright with festive colors. Decorative lights hung everywhere, their glow reflecting off windows and roadside trees. Fresh flowers filled the small stalls, and the sound of greetings floated through the air, lively but not loud, warm enough to soften the chill of the year's end. Hoài Ca and Hung's family blended into the crowd, moving slowly and calmly. When the last decorations were finally put up, their small home suddenly felt unusually warm. Not because everything was extravagant or perfect, but because every corner carried the mark of care and togetherness. Everything felt just right, in a way that belonged uniquely to their family. Hoài Ca paused for a moment, looking around the house, then smiled softly. It wasn't a radiant smile, but it carried a quiet sense of reassurance and contentment. Hung stepped back slightly, silently taking in the familiar space before him, then let out a gentle breath, as if releasing the remaining weight of the old year. As the year slowly came to a close in this peaceful way, small moments continued to pass quietly, signaling that a new chapter was drawing very near. Hung carefully selected each decoration, his gaze lingering at every shelf. He favored simple items, nothing overly elaborate, with soft colors and, most importantly, safe to use. It had almost become second nature to him. Years of working as a police officer had trained him to notice even the smallest details, sharp edges, exposed wires, the height at which things were hung. For Hung, the family's sense of security always mattered more than anything visually striking. Hoài Ca stood beside him, quietly observing the way he made his choices. She didn't rush to comment, only occasionally glancing around before gently adding a few items in calm, soothing tones. Nothing flashy or attention-grabbing, just colors that felt easy on the eyes, the kind one could look at for a long time without growing tired. To Hoài Ca, beauty had never been about abundance or display, but about the feeling of peace when the family was together, when every corner of the home felt familiar and comforting. Tony didn't say much during that time. He stayed close to his parents, his eyes constantly following the shimmering decorations in front of him. Every now and then, he pointed at the tiny strings of lights, their reflections making his eyes sparkle. When he received a nod of permission, he smiled, a quiet smile, rare and complete, as if that joy was something he carefully held inside. When the family returned home, the small house began to change little by little. Not through grand gestures, but through slow, loving movements. The atmosphere gradually shifted, growing warmer, taking on the gentle rhythm unique to the final days of the year. The doors were wiped clean, every small speck of dust given attention. Warm yellow lights were hung by the windows, their glow spreading softly as evening fell. Familiar corners of the house, places passed by every day, were renewed through quiet care, through hands that were familiar yet endlessly patient. Hoài Ca arranged the flowers, placing each stem into the vase with slow, careful movements. She paused now and then to look, adjusting them until everything felt just right. Not too full, not too sparse. Hung the decorations, standing up and bending down again, patiently adjusting the height, so everything stayed within a child's reach, avoiding spots that might pose a risk. These tasks seemed small, but each was done with complete attention. Tony helped in his own way. He carried items over to his parents, sometimes tiny pieces, sometimes things not quite needed yet. He placed them in corners he believed would look better there, then stepped back a few paces to admire his work, his face serious, as if completing an important mission. Anna lay in her crib, her round eyes wide open, quietly observing everything moving around her. The lights reflected softly on her tiny face. Hushed voices and gentle footsteps created a world in motion just within reach. Anna couldn't yet understand it all, but she seemed to feel the warmth surrounding her, as the small house slowly took on a familiar yet new appearance, shaped by the simple, everyday rhythm of family life. The house gradually grew warmer, not only because of the glow from the strings of lights hanging in every small corner. That warmth came from things invisible to the eye, from little stories shared while working together, from understanding glances that needed no explanation, and from the comfortable silences that naturally exist between people who have loved each other long enough to no longer find quietness empty. In those moments, Hoài Ca suddenly realized that preparing for the new year had never been just about hanging decorations or rearranging the house. It was her way of preserving memories that were slowly taking shape, of creating a sense of safety for her children in a constantly changing world, and of sincerely cherishing the simple fact of being together, after everything the family had silently been through. As night fell, the rhythm of life inside the small house slowed down in the most natural way. Daytime sounds faded, giving way to a gentle stillness. The family gathered in the living room, each in a familiar spot, yet closer than ever before. The soft yellow light reflected on the faces of Hoài Ca, Hung, Tony, and Anna, creating a space that wasn't too bright, just enough to see one another clearly and to feel each person's presence. Hoài Ca sat quietly, her gaze distant, letting her thoughts drift back over the past year. Images surfaced slowly, the long months of worry during pregnancy, the sleepless nights when both body and mind were exhausted, and the days when it felt like she no longer had the strength to keep going. None of it was as sharp as before, but it was still clear enough to remind her of what she had endured. Hung spoke softly, his voice calm and steady. He talked about gratitude, not at length, and without heaviness. After all the pressure, responsibilities, and challenges from work, what made him feel stronger each day had nothing to do with his position or role in society. It was the family sitting right in front of him, the people who gave him a reason to come home, to keep trying, and to never give up. Tony sat nearby, his small hands resting on the chair, listening attentively even though he couldn't fully understand what the adults were saying. He simply felt the peaceful atmosphere filling the room, the familiar closeness of his parents. And Tony's presence, along with Anna resting quietly in loving arms, was the clearest proof of growth day by day, of a quiet but enduring hope, and of new beginnings taking shape within these very ordinary moments of life. The whole family bowed their heads together. The moment unfolded slowly, quietly, as if time itself had softened to make room for the stillness that was needed. No one spoke. There were no guiding words, no elaborate ritual, yet the silence held more emotion than any speech ever could. Their gratitude was offered silently, not only for the good things that had come in the past year, for the rare peaceful days they had been lucky to have, but also for the challenges and hardships that had once left them exhausted, uncertain, and at times feeling as though they might not make it through. Those trials, though far from easy, had taught them more than they had ever expected. They learned patience with one another in moments of tension, humility before a life that never quite follows one's plans, and trust that the road ahead, however unclear, was still worth walking together. In that shared bow of the head, each person carried their own thoughts, yet they all met at the same place: gratitude for still being here, together, whole. In that prolonged silence, Hoài Ca felt a clear sense of lightness spreading through her chest. The burdens of the old year, the layered worries, the exhausting nights, the quiet fears she rarely spoke of, seemed to be set down, if only for a moment. Not because every problem had vanished, nor because the future had suddenly become easier, but because she understood that she no longer had to face everything alone. Beside her were Hung, Tony, and Anna, the people who made every hardship, though still present, feel gentler when shared. Time continued to move forward, slowly, but without stopping. Each passing second brought the house closer to midnight. As the moment drew near, a soft sense of anticipation began to spread through the space. Not loud, not hurried, just a quiet, unmistakable feeling of waiting. The air inside the house felt lighter, every movement carrying the rhythm of the year's final moments. Hung glanced at the clock a few times, then looked back at the children, his gaze lingering as if he wanted to etch that image into his memory. Tony, on the other hand, could not sit still. He ran from room to room, his small feet moving quickly, powered by endless childlike energy. He visited every corner of the house, as though checking over his familiar world one last time before the new year arrived. From time to time, he turned back to look at his mother and his sister, his eyes lingering just a bit longer, as if to make sure everything was still there, still within sight, still within reach. Each time he saw Hoài Ca holding Anna, he seemed reassured, then resumed his familiar running, light-footed and full of excitement. Anna lay nestled in Hoài Ca's arms, sleeping peacefully. Her steady breathing made Hoài Ca instinctively tighten her embrace, a movement so gentle it was almost unconscious, the reflex of a mother. She was afraid to disturb that fragile sleep, afraid to wake the small, peaceful world resting against her chest. Anna's face was completely relaxed, unaware that a turning point in time was so close that the world around her was quietly shifting into a new chapter. Yet it was precisely that tiny presence that made the moment feel more complete, more whole, in the most natural way. And then the moment of stepping into 2026 arrived. There were no fireworks lighting up the sky, no loud countdown, no familiar bursts of celebration. Only silent embraces, soft smiles appearing on each face, and whispered wishes spoken so gently, as if afraid to break the calm surrounding the small house. It was not a moment meant to overwhelm, but it was deep enough for everyone to feel the meaning of the transition. The new year appeared not merely as a changing number on the wall clock. For Hoài Ca and Hùng, it became a quiet promise formed in that very instant, a promise to continue walking side by side, to keep loving, and to remain connected, even though the road ahead still held many unknowns. In the familiar space of their small home, among the people they knew best, that promise did not need to be spoken. It was written in their presence together, in embraces held just tight enough, and in a love that quietly endured, steady and faithful through each ordinary day. As the house gradually fell quiet after a long day, the earlier sounds of activity slowly faded away. Small footsteps no longer ran from room to room, and the lights were dimmed just enough to soften the space. Hoài Ca lingered in the room for a long moment, quietly watching her two children sleeping soundly. Tony lay on his side, his breathing steady, his face relaxed after a day full of movement. Anna slept peacefully in her crib, her tiny hands gently curling with each breath, completely at ease in her own little world. Hùng stood beside Hoài Ca, without saying a word, simply reaching out to hold her hand. The grip was neither tight nor hurried, yet it was enough for Hoài Ca to feel that familiar, steady presence. In the quiet of the room, that small gesture became a natural comfort, a silent reminder that they were still together, walking through each stage of life side by side. Hoài Ca tilted her head slightly, her eyes never leaving her children. In that moment, she didn't think about distant plans or things yet to come. She simply felt the fullness of what was right in front of her, not perfect, not grand, but warm enough to soften the heart. The fatigue of a long day seemed to melt away, giving room to a rare sense of peace. No matter how the years might change, no matter how time continued to move forward, Hoài Ca and Hùng both understood that the most important things remained intact. It was the small family living within this home, the quiet yet steadfast companionship between two adults, and the silent faith in tomorrow, that whatever life might bring, they would face it together. As 2026 began, no grand promises were spoken, and no detailed plans were carefully laid out. There was only Hoài Ca, Hùng, Tony, and Anna, for people ready to move forward together, slowly, at their own gentle pace. They carried with them the lessons of the past year, the bond strengthened through countless ordinary days, and an open-hearted readiness to welcome the road ahead with a soft, hopeful spirit. The journey continues, with many real-life moments still left untold. Stay tuned for the next episode to follow what comes next, and don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment to continue accompanying Hoài Ca and Hùng family in the stories yet to unfold.